What if the very thing keeping love away from you is the fact that you are still looking for it? There is a psychological paradox that Carl Jung uncovered over a century ago that most people have never heard explained properly. It is a paradox that flips everything you have been taught about love, attraction, and relationships completely on its head. And it specifically affects women who have gone through something most people never go through: a deep, painful, transformative process of becoming psychologically whole. These women did not read a self-help book and call it growth. They went through fire. They faced the darkest parts of themselves. They sat with pain that most people spend their entire lives running from. And something happened on the other side of that fire that nobody warned them about. They stopped chasing love, not as a strategy, not as a game, not because someone told them to play hard to get. They stopped because something fundamental inside their psyche restructured itself. The need dissolved. And the moment that need dissolved, something strange and almost paradoxical began to happen. Love started moving toward them. Not the chaotic, anxious, unstable love they used to attract, but a different kind entirely. A kind that felt calm, grounded, and almost inevitable. The question is why? Why does a woman who stops seeking become the one who is sought? Why does the absence of desperation create the presence of attraction? And what exactly did Carl Jung understand about the feminine psyche that explains this phenomenon with terrifying precision? That is what we are going to unravel today. And I promise you, by the time we are finished, you will never see your own transformation the same way again. Before we continue, welcome to Carl Jung Decoded. This is a side of psychology that most people never explore, but these ideas deserve to be understood. I'm curious. Where in the world are you listening from today? Let me know in the comments, and it helps us build a community of people who believe these ideas can change lives. To understand why this paradox exists, you first have to understand what actually happens inside a woman's mind during the process Jung called individuation. And I do not mean the watered-down version people throw around on social media. I mean the real thing. The process Jung described is not gentle. It is not a weekend retreat or a journaling habit. Individuation is the psychological equivalent of being taken apart piece by piece and then reassembled from the inside out. It begins when a woman starts to notice that the life she built no longer fits. The relationships that once made her feel safe start to feel suffocating. The role she played so effortlessly, the good girlfriend, the understanding partner, the one who always forgives, suddenly feel like costumes she cannot wear anymore. There is a restlessness that has no name. A dissatisfaction that is not about any specific thing but about everything at once. This is not a midlife crisis. This is the psyche knocking from the inside. Jung described the unconscious as a living force with its own intelligence. When a woman reaches a certain threshold of emotional experience, when she has loved and lost and bent herself into enough shapes for enough people, the unconscious begins to push back. It says, enough. You have been living as a fragment. It is time to become whole. The first stage of this process is brutal. It involves meeting what Jung called the shadow. The shadow is every part of yourself you have hidden, denied, or rejected, because it did not fit the image you were taught to maintain. For many women, the shadow contains anger, real, hot, justified anger that was buried under years of politeness and accommodation. The shadow contains selfishness, the healthy kind that says my needs matter too. The shadow contains the capacity to say no and mean it without guilt, without explanation, and without apology. When a woman begins to integrate her shadow, she changes in ways that disturb the people around her. Friends who are used to her compliance suddenly find her unavailable. Partners who relied on her endless patience suddenly find boundaries where there used to be open doors. Family members who expected her to absorb everyone else's emotions suddenly find that she has stopped volunteering for that role. This is not a woman becoming cold. This is a woman becoming real. And the difference between the two is everything. Jung wrote extensively about how the shadow, once integrated, does not make a person darker. It makes them more complete. It fills in the missing pieces. A woman who has faced her own rage, her own selfishness, her own capacity for cruelty, and chosen to own it rather than project it onto others' gains, something that cannot be faked. She gains depth. And depth is the single most attractive quality a human being can possess. But shadow integration is only the first layer. The next part of individuation is where the real paradox of attraction begins to form, and it involves a concept that Jung considered one of his most important discoveries. The animus is Jung's term for the unconscious masculine element that exists within every woman's psyche. Now, before you dismiss this as abstract theory, consider how it actually plays out in real life. Every woman carries within her an internal image of the masculine. This image is shaped by her father, her early relationships, her culture, and her deepest unconscious material. When the animus is unconscious, meaning when a woman has not yet recognized and integrated this inner masculine figure, it runs her love life from behind the scenes like an invisible puppeteer. An unconscious animus does something very specific. It creates projection. The woman looks at a man and does not see him as he actually is. She sees him through the lens of her inner masculine image. She projects onto him qualities that actually belong to her own psyche. She might see strength in him that is actually her own unrecognized strength. She might see wisdom in him that is actually her own unlived wisdom. She might see emotional depth in him that is actually the depth she has not yet allowed herself to access. This is why certain women are magnetically drawn to specific types of men. Not because those men are objectively remarkable, but because they carry the shape of the woman's unintegrated animus. The man becomes a screen onto which she projects the parts of herself she has not yet claimed. And this is where the chasing begins. When a woman is projecting her animus onto a man, she does not experience it as projection. She experiences it as love. She experiences it as destiny. She experiences it as that feeling of finally finding the one. But what she is actually doing is running toward a reflection of her own unlived potential. She is chasing herself. She just does not know it yet. This is why the pursuit feels so desperate, so urgent, so all-consuming. It is not really about the man. It is about the parts of her soul that she has abandoned and now sees reflected in someone external. She is trying to retrieve herself through him, and it never works. It cannot work. Because you cannot become whole by attaching yourself to someone who mirrors your missing pieces. You can only become whole by finding those pieces inside yourself. This is the insight that changes everything. When a woman goes through genuine individuation, something extraordinary happens with her animus. She begins to withdraw the projection. Not all at once. It happens gradually, painfully, and with tremendous grief. Because withdrawing a projection feels like losing love. It feels like the magic is dying. It feels like the man she adored is disappearing and being replaced by someone ordinary. But what is actually happening is that she is reclaiming her own power. The strength she saw in him, she now recognizes as her own. The wisdom she admired in him, she now accesses within herself. The emotional depth she craved from him, she now provides for herself. The woman does not become masculine in this process. She becomes complete. She integrates the animus as an inner ally rather than projecting it outward as an obsession. Jung described this integrated animus as a bridge to the deeper self. When the animus is no longer projected, it begins to function as an internal source of clarity, discernment, courage, and creative power. The woman gains access to qualities she previously believed she could only experience through a man. She can now think with precision without needing a man to think for her. She can now act with decisiveness without needing a man to lead her. She can now protect herself emotionally without needing a man to shield her. She has become, in the deepest psychological sense, self-sufficient. Not in the cold, defensive way that the world sometimes teaches women to be independent, but in the warm, grounded, genuine way that comes from knowing who you are at every level of your being. This is the woman who stops chasing, and she stops not because she made a decision to stop. She stops because there is nothing left to chase. The hunger is gone. The void that used to send her running toward men, hoping one of them would finally make her feel complete, has been filled from within. She is not performing detachment. She is genuinely whole. And here is where the paradox fully reveals itself. A woman who has withdrawn her projections and integrated her animus radiates, something that is almost impossible to describe, but absolutely impossible to ignore. Jung himself struggled to articulate it, but he pointed toward the concept he called the self, the fully realized center of the psyche that emerges when conscious and unconscious are integrated. When a woman operates from the self rather than from the ego, her entire energy signature changes. She is no longer anxious. She is no longer scanning every room for potential partners. She is no longer adjusting her personality to fit what she thinks men want. She is no longer performing femininity. She is simply being. And being, it turns out, is the most powerful form of attraction that exists. There is a psychological phenomenon that supports this. When a person stops projecting unconscious material onto others, they become psychologically transparent. Not transparent in the sense of being exposed, but in the sense of being clear. There is no hidden agenda in their energy. There is no manipulation, no games, no strategy. Here is just a human being who is genuinely comfortable in their own skin. This kind of clarity is extraordinarily rare. Most people walk around carrying so many unconscious projections, so many unhealed wounds, so many unexamined patterns that their energy is muddled and confusing. They send mixed signals because they are mixed signals. A whole woman does not send mixed signals. She sends one signal. Here I am. And that signal cuts through the noise of every other interaction like a lighthouse beam through fog. If this is giving you clarity about what you have been experiencing in your own life, take a moment to hit subscribe, because every video on this channel is designed to help you see the psychology that most people never examine. There is another layer to this paradox that makes it even more fascinating. When a woman stops projecting her animus, she also stops attracting men who are only drawn to her projection. Think about what this means practically. Before individuation, the woman was unconsciously broadcasting a signal. That signal said, I am looking for someone to complete me. I need someone to be my strength, my direction, my emotional anchor. Certain types of men are highly attuned to this signal. Men with narcissistic tendencies, men who need to feel needed, men who enjoy the power dynamic of being someone's everything. These men are attracted not to the woman herself, but to her dependency. When the dependency dissolves, these men lose interest. They cannot feel the familiar signal anymore. They drift away or they become uncomfortable because the woman no longer feeds their ego in the way they require. This is why many women going through individuation experience a period of profound loneliness. The old type of man stops showing up and the new type has not arrived yet. This middle space is terrifying. It feels like proof that something is wrong with you. It feels like the transformation has made you unlovable. But this interpretation is completely backwards. What is actually happening is a complete recalibration of your attraction field. You are no longer a match for the men who needed your brokenness, and you are becoming a match for men who can meet your wholeness. These are fundamentally different kinds of men. A man who is attracted to a whole woman is himself doing the work of becoming whole. He has likely faced his own shadow. He has likely begun integrating his anima, which is Jung's term for the unconscious feminine element in a man's psyche. He is not looking for someone to complete him either. He is looking for someone to share completeness with. This kind of man does not respond to chasing. In fact, chasing repels him because he recognizes it as a sign of unconscious projection. What attracts him is authenticity. What attracts him is a woman who is so rooted in her own identity that she does not need him to define it. What attracts him is the calm, steady, unshakable presence of a woman who has been through the fire and come out the other side with her soul intact. Jung observed that when two individuated people come together, the relationship operates on an entirely different plane than ordinary relationships. He called this kind of connection a relationship of wholeness rather than a relationship of need. In a relationship of need, each person is trying to extract something from the other. Validation, security, identity, purpose. In a relationship of wholeness, each person is already full. They come together not to take, but to share. Yeah. To fill voids, but to create something new. Not to use each other as mirrors, but to genuinely see each other as separate, complete, sovereign beings. This kind of relationship is rare. It is what most people dream of, but very few achieve, because very few people do the inner work required to sustain it. It requires two people who have both faced their shadows, integrated their contrasexual archetypes, and begun operating from the self rather than the ego. But when it happens, it is unmistakable. There is no anxiety. There is no constant questioning. There is no drama for the sake of drama. There is simply two whole people choosing each other from a place of freedom rather than a place of fear. And this brings us to the deepest layer of the paradox. The part that most people never discuss because it requires a level of honesty that is genuinely uncomfortable. The reason a transformed woman becomes magnetically attractive is not just because she is whole. It is because wholeness confronts everyone who encounters it. When you are in the presence of someone who has genuinely done the inner work, you feel something. It is not always comfortable. Sometimes it is deeply unsettling. Because a whole person acts as a mirror, not the kind of mirror that shows you what you want to see, but the kind that shows you what you have been avoiding. A woman who has integrated her shadow does not need you to perform for her. And when you realize that your usual performance is not landing, you are forced to confront why you were performing in the first place. A woman who has withdrawn her projections does not idealize you. And when you realize that someone is seeing the real you, not the inflated image you present to the world, it can be both terrifying and deeply relieving. A woman who operates from the self rather than the ego does not engage in power games. And when you realize that there is no game to win, you are left with a choice. Either rise to meet her at the level of authenticity she is operating on, or walk away because you are not ready. Most people walk away, and that is fine. The transformed woman does not take it personally because she understands that not everyone is ready to be seen that clearly. But the people who stay, the people who can handle the mirror, they experience something they have never experienced before. They experience being known, not the surface level knowing of shared interests and compatible schedules. The deep knowing, the kind where someone sees your wound and does not flinch, the kind where someone sees your shadow and does not run. The kind where you can be fully human, messy and contradictory and imperfect, and be loved not in spite of it but within it. This is what the awakened feminine offers, and it is why she does not need to chase. What she carries is so rare, so genuine and so powerful that it creates its own gravitational field. The right people are pulled into her orbit. The wrong people are repelled. And she trusts this process because she has learned, through the long and painful work of individuation, that the psyche knows what it is doing, even when the conscious mind does not. Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. For the woman who has undergone this transformation, that statement is not an inspirational quote on a wall. It is a lived reality. She has paid the price of becoming herself. She has grieved the death of the woman she used to be. She has endured the loneliness of the middle space where the old life is gone and the new life has not yet formed. She has faced every uncomfortable truth that her unconscious placed in front of her. And she has emerged not as a perfect being, but as a real one. The paradox of the awakened feminine is that she becomes most attractive at the exact moment she stops caring about being attractive. She becomes most magnetic at the exact moment she stops trying to pull anyone toward her. She becomes most lovable at the exact moment she realizes she does not need anyone else's love to feel complete. This is not coldness. This is not indifference. This is the deepest form of self-love that exists. And it is the foundation upon which every genuine, lasting, transformative relationship is built. The woman who has done this work does not wait for love with anxiety. She does not scan the horizon wondering when it will arrive. She lives. She creates. She rests in her own depth. And love, when it comes, does not find a desperate woman hoping to be chosen. It finds a sovereign woman who is ready to choose. If what you heard today shifted something inside you, subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because what we explore here is not surface-level content. It is the psychology that changes how you see yourself and everyone around you.